Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching the China Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. US President Donald Trump has said that he expects to reach a trade deal with Chinese President Xi Jinping during their meeting next week in South Korea. Trump has also plans to discuss China's purchase of Russian oil and possibly restart US soybean exports. He also mentioned that a deal on nuclear arms could be on the table. China has overtaken the United States as Germany's top trading partner, even as German exports to China fell 13.5% and imports rose 8.3%. While US tariffs cut German exports by 7.4%, Berlin now faces growing concerns over shifting global trade dynamics amid escalating economic and security tensions between Beijing, Washington, and Europe. The European Union's 19th sanctions package against Russia will target 4 Chinese companies, including 2 oil refineries and a trading firm, in what officials call the most economically significant action against China so far. Beijing has denied any wrongdoing as the EU moves to adopt the new sanctions this week. China has announced it will celebrate the 80th anniversary of Taiwan's retrocession to Chinese rule this Saturday at Beijing's Great Hall of the People, marking the island's 1945 return from Japanese colonial rule, according to them. However, Taiwan has banned officials from attending, accusing Beijing of distorting history for political purposes. Airbus has opened a second assembly line in Tianjin, China, to boost A320 Neojet production while carefully balancing trade tensions between US and China. The expansion, mirroring a new line in Mobile, US, comes as Airbus aims to produce 75 A320 Neojets monthly by 2027. Taiwan's Defense Ministry has announced plans to deepen military cooperation with the United States through reciprocal visits, joint exercise observations, and strategic dialogues to safeguard regional stability. Defense Minister Wellington Koo has said that the U.S. Taiwan's key security partner will play a central role in maintaining peace in the Taiwan Strait amid growing Chinese pressure. Syrian authorities have arrested a former military officer, accusing him of executing detainees at the notorious Saidnaya prison during the rule of ousted leader Bashar al-Assad. The prison, long symbolic of Assad's brutal repression, which has been linked to thousands of torture and execution cases. Israeli lawmakers have the advancement of West Bank annexation bills as global pressure mounts for Israel to comply with the ICJ ruling on Palestinian rights. UN Chief Antonio Guterres has urged Israel to abide by the court's decision, while UN rights expert Francesca Albanese has condemned the US-brokered Gaza ceasefire plan as inadequate to stop what she called a genocide. Now we start from US-China. US President Donald Trump has expressed optimism about reaching a series of agreements with Chinese President Xi Jinping during their upcoming meeting in South Korea. Speaking from the Oval Office, Trump has stated that a deal was likely on a variety of issues. Let's listen in.
In South Korea, I'll be meeting with President Xi of China. We'll have a pretty long meeting scheduled. We can work out a lot of our questions and our doubts and our tremendous assets together. So we look forward to that. I think something will work out. We have a very good relationship, but that'll be a big one. I think we'll make a deal. I think we're going to make a deal on the rare earth is the least of it. Look, the tariffs are much more powerful than the rare earth. The rare earth is a disturbance, but there's a lot of rare earth around. I'll tell you, I've had more calls on rare earth. We've got it, everybody's. We'll make a deal on, I think, everything. I think we're going to make a deal on soybeans and the farmers.
President Trump has also intended to address China's purchases of Russian oil amid the ongoing war in Ukraine, as U.S. officials, including Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, are heading to Asia to resolve tensions over China's rare earth export restrictions. While trade talks are set to continue, Trump's administration is preparing further measures, including potential export restrictions on China. The Trump administration is considering new export restrictions targeting China. It is a move that could limit shipments of goods containing U.S. software. This proposed action is seen as a response to China's recent restrictions on rare earth exports, which are crucial for tech manufacturing. The measure could impact everything from laptops to jet engines by curbing global shipments of items made with or using U.S. software. While this plan is still under discussion, it could escalate tensions in the ongoing trade war. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has confirmed that all options are on the table, but acknowledged potential risk to U.S. industry. Meanwhile, China has warned it will take countermeasures if these controls are implemented. The proposal comes ahead of President Trump's planned meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping later this month. Now for this discussion, we welcome Andrew K.P. Long. He's a China strategist, joins us live from Cairo. Thank you very much, Andrew, for joining us again. Good to see you. Andrew, now looking at this news now, U.S. has said that they could look into, or they could consider bringing U.S. softwares into these trade talks. How do you think this will affect the current relationship and upcoming summit if it were to take place between Xi and Trump?
Well, first of all, please don't refer to me as speaking from Cairo. I was there only on a cruise holiday, and I'm now back in Hong Kong, where I'm permanently based. You see, I'm the China strategist based in Hong Kong.
Sorry, thank you.
Now, as far as the China-U.S. relation, it's a contest of power because under President Trump, the whole world so-called rule-based order has been thrown out of the window. It's now the contest of power, of dominance. And of course, President Trump is past master of this game, the game of power. Now, he's now trying to use weaponizing the United States power as the world's largest economy. He's weaponizing the U.S. dollar. He's weaponizing the U.S. stranglehold over semiconductor chips. And he thought that all these power dynamics could defeat China's rights to become a challenger to American dominance. Now, of course, China's economy has been hard hit, including internal dynamics, declining demographics. But on the other hand, China still remains the world's largest exporting country by far, the largest world manufacturer of almost everything under the sun. And of course, the Chinese trade is much less dependent on the United States. It's only about 10%. So even there is no trade with the United States at all, China's global trade and exports could still grow, as evidenced by the fact that during the past couple of months, China's overall exports has in fact increased, pivoting to Europe. And that's why the European countries, including Germany, have seen a large growth in China's trade and China's exports, and also in the global south. Now, as far as the software is concerned, China, of course, has long pivoted towards self-reliance on technology within software. And as evidenced by China's success in the AI sector, The DeepSeek, for example, is the latest Chinese invention. Uses its own, to a certain extent, its own software. But on the other hand, it still relies on American software to a large extent. But that alone doesn't prevent China from fast developing its own software, its own semiconductors, particularly semiconductors centered on AI, which is a whole new dynamics, as distinct from the kind of semiconductors based in the previous technologies. So I think this is the contents of power, and I think that both countries understand it. Both countries do not want to go to war because both countries are nuclear armed to the teeth, especially the United States, and for China with its hypersonic intercontinental weapons. So I don't think that both countries will ever want to go to war. But on the other hand, both are trying to test each other's resolve. And of course, in this kind of dynamics, they also seek areas of cooperation. For the United States, for President Trump, the most important dynamic is the coming up midterm elections. And a lot of electors are from the Americans' agricultural states. And they all depend on a large extent on soybeans export to China. For China, soybeans is not a rare commodity. China has been using that by pivoting its supply of soybeans by sourcing Brazil and other countries, and Russia, for example. So all the Chinese soybean orders have gone to these countries, to Brazil, to Russia and other countries. And then the President Trump's electors in these agricultural states supporting the Republican Party, they're all cramping, they're all suffering. So I think that this translates into a possible deal between President Trump and President Xi. Each one has got to concede something, but I think that the United States may have to concede more than China in this regard.
Thank you very much, Andrew K.B. Long, for joining us from Hong Kong and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has confirmed that all options remain on the table regarding potential software export controls on China. These measures could include restrictions on software, engines, as well as other technologies. Moreover, any actions taken by the U.S. would likely align with its G7 allies. This comes after U.S. President Donald Trump recently announced plans to impose additional tariffs on Chinese shipments to the U.S. The U.S. President also stated that new export controls on critical software could take effect by November 1st, though no specifics were provided. These proposed measures are a response to China's recent restrictions on rare earth exports, which have further strained relations between the two nations. Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, alongside U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, is set to meet with Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng in Malaysia this week. This meeting is seen as a preparatory step ahead of the high-level talks between President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping, which is scheduled to take place in South Korea on the sidelines of the APEC forum. Now for this discussion, we go back to Andrew K.B. Long. He's a China strategist, joins us live from Hong Kong. Thank you very much, Andrew, for staying with us.
Thank you.
Andrew, now what can G7 do to EU do to realistically think of countermeasuring these tariffs that would affect them as well, the US's tariffs on EU, including technology on China?
Well, the European Union, for the first time in many decades, is placed in a contrary because the European countries have over many decades relied on the United States as a main trading partner and a reliable partner in terms of maintaining a global order favorable to the Europeans' development and trajectory, and of course allying with its values, with the ideology. But on the other hand, the Europeans are more open to investing in China, to doing business in China, because China has been, of course, as I explained, has become the world's largest trader by far. China is the main trading partner, is the largest trading partner, not just the main, of 128 countries around the world, compared with only 58 for the United States. And has now, of course, become the world's manufacturer by far, producing almost anything under the sun. Apart from its dominance in components and or logistics. Now, for the European Union, they want more China's investment, but on the other hand, they are wary about the security risk, but also they want to do business with China. Now, of course, China is now wising up to the strategy of not only trading or exporting to the European Unions, they are investing in production of the same kind of products inside the countries in the European Union or the rest of Europe in order to secure jobs for the host countries. And that would, of course, be welcomed by the Europeans. And the Europeans, of course, wants to form a relationship with China as a countermeasure by President Trump's unilateralism, also threatening the United States traditional allies like Europe. On the one hand, President Trump called Europeans allies. On the other hand, he's imposing a lot of restrictions on Europe to just unilateral. I mean, it's not a measure against any other thing, because President Trump wants dominance, and he wants Americans getting all the benefits. And above all, he's trampling on the sovereignty of European allies, not just Canada, but also belittling countries like even Germany or France, and it's now dictating terms on how to deal with Russia. So I think that Europe is now trying to recalibrate its relationship with China, especially on trade and investments, and to a certain extent as a counterweight against President Trump's American First coercion.
Right. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next news. EU Economy Commissioner Valdis Dombrovskis has confirmed that the European Commission is exploring countermeasures in response to China's recent curbs on rare earth exports. In a recent interview, Dombrovskis has noted that while specific measures have not been identified yet, the discussion, however, is ongoing. The EU Commissioner has further clarified that any countermeasures would be coordinated with international partners, including discussions held at the recent G7 finance ministers meeting in Washington, which he had just attended. China's curbs on rare earth exports have remained tight even after a July agreement to expedite shipments to Europe. Earlier this month, Beijing announced further expansions of these curbs, further complicating EU supply chains. Additionally, in response to these restrictions, the EU Trade Chief Maros Sefcovic has scheduled meetings with Chinese officials to seek urgent solutions regarding rare earth exports. The pressure on EU leaders is mounting, particularly from industries affected by China's new export conditions. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Stephen Nagy. He's a professor of International Christian University, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Professor Stephen, for joining us again. Good to see you. Professor, how should European Union balance its economic dependence on Chinese rare earth exports with the need to protect strategic industries and ensure supply chain, secure supply chain?
Well, the solution is short, mid, and long term. In reality, that the Chinese today monopolize not only the mines, but also the processing of rare earth materials. So in the short term, European countries working together, probably with the United States, Australia, and others, will need to find ways to secure rare earth materials and then engage in the processing. In the mid to long term, I think that there's technological solutions and finding new partners which will decrease China's leverage using rare earth materials as a form of a coercive policy. And in this sense, I think China has applying rare earth material embargoes or limiting the supplies is really a one-shot weapon to try and shape the behavior of Europeans and other countries. And over the mid to long term, it will no longer be viable and they'll lose their leverage. So the Europeans need to be patient. They need to be pragmatic about who they and where they get rare earth materials from, but they also have to invest in the technology to process them in the short term to maintain their economic edge. And again, think about this over the mid to long term.
And what kinds of countermeasures could the EU realistically implement without escalating trade tension? And how might coordination with, maybe G7 partners or other EU members strengthen its position?
So we know that China, again, has monopolized the rare earth supplies in terms of purchasing mines. I think they have about 60 to 70% of the mines and 90% of the processing. So this is the bottleneck that European countries need to work with and work within. They can apply leverage on China by limiting access to its market. They can apply China by through diplomatic action that pressures China on other issues that may be sensitive to China. This could be engaging with Taiwan. It could be on South China Sea issues. It could be on trade that is important for keeping the Chinese economy going. Remember, China is an export-dominant and dependent country. If it's not exporting its goods to Europe or other parts around the world, it's not getting currency to keep their economy going. This has to be very clear. It has to be put on the table, and the Europeans have to very much, embody a trade policy that reflects how the Chinese engage in trade. They connect everything, and they're willing to apply pressure to the Europeans to shape the behavior. The Europeans should do the same, but do this alongside the G7 members, of course with the United States, Australia, Japan, and others. It's only through collective action that they can really manage this challenge.
How do you think, how would that look like? How might this friction between EU and China influence Europe's broader economic and diplomatic strategy moving forward?
So I think it's important for us to understand that Europe's problem is very much related to the broader US-China strategic competition. The US and China are competing in terms of technology, who's dominating the AI and quantum computing, and who's shaping the rules of the road. And Beijing is very much interested in revising the post-Cold War rules-based order and making it an order that is in favor of Chinese interests and Chinese priorities. In that sense, as we think about the Europe cooperating moving forward and how it's going to manage this important relationship, I think, again, it has to really work with like-minded countries like Japan in the Indo-Pacific region to shape the Indo-Pacific region, to make it a multipolar region which pulls the center of economic gravity away from China and distributes from India, Southeast Asian countries, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand access, and of course the US. By doing this, Europe will have more strategic autonomy in how it manages its relationship with China, but it will also have more strategic autonomy in how it manages its relationship with the United States. And this means, again, it means working with partners that have similar broader objective of decentering the global economy away from China towards a broader distribution of countries and regions that really decreases China's leverage and ensures that China plays by rules rather than breaks those rules.
Thank you very much for sharing that thorough insight, Professor Stefan Nagy, for joining us today and also sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now we stay in the region. Germany has reclaimed China as its largest trading partner in the first 8 months of this year, surpassing the US according to preliminary data. Trade with China had totaled 163.4 billion euros, while US trade was 162.8 billion euros. The US had been Germany's top partner last year. U.S. tariffs have hit German exports, which fell 7.4% to 99.6 billion euros, with August alone down 23.5% year-on-year basis. Exports to China have dropped 13.5% to 54.7 billion euros, but imports have risen 8.3% to 108.8 billion euros, raising concerns over dumping prices and Germany's dependence. Analysts have warned that with a strong euro and tariff pressure, exports to the U.S. are unlikely to recover soon, while imports from China continue to grow. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Professor Stefan Nagy. He's a professor at International Christian University, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, how will China's emergence as Germany's top trading partner reshape Germany as well as Europe's economic and political alignment amid rising tensions with U.S. as well?
So what we've seen is, as the U.S.-China strategic rivalry and tariff war ensues, China has tried to find other markets and other countries to offload its products and become more prominent trade partners. This is a natural byproduct of the competition as the United States puts tariffs on Chinese products and they're looking to sell products because it's a market-based economy. For Germany, this makes it difficult for Germany to take tough policies on China, whether it's security policies or having joint policies on to address China's stranglehold on rare earth materials. And it also makes it more difficult for Germany to deal with other issues that are related to Germany and the EU, such as the Russia-Ukraine war. It's important for the United States to understand that this balance or this relationship with China will make it more difficult to address many issues, whether it's NATO alignment, dealing with the Russia invasion of Ukraine, or the broader, and I think most important challenge is trying to prevent authoritarian states from revising the rules-based order that we've become accustomed to in the post-Cold War period. Lastly, and I think importantly, bigger trade relationships that China has with Germany will probably negatively impact how the European Union functions on other issues that China has some kind of interest in, whether that's ports or shared definitions of human rights, or even definitions about democracy. Germany is a strong democracy. Its post-World War II history is very much rooted in understanding its Nazi past, and it's been a champion of human rights and democracy, but trade relations has changed that to a certain extent, meaning that trade and economics can affect the decision-making of leaders, and this affects the unity of the European Union and its unified approach to challenges facing the Union.
And Professor, building on your answer, and you explained how intertwined all these are. So are these tariffs on German exports accelerating Europe's pivot towards China, and what long-term risks could this pose for transatlantic relations?
So in my understanding, the tariffs that have been applied by the United States on many countries, including Germany, yes, are aimed to try and recalibrate trade relations and decrease the deficit that exists between the United States and countries as varied as Germany to Japan to South Korea. Some of this is understandable. Some of it's being used to shape security behavior or positions on migration, etc. And in this sense, there is some, we can understand some of these policies. But the tariffs are indeed, I think, pushing not only Europe, but other countries to look to countries that will not give them tariffs and open up large markets so that they can continue to have profitable businesses. I think once the Trump administration has a better realization of the consequences of some of its policies, they may step back. But again, I think we're going to have to wait until the midterms in which the American public does make a decision about the Trump administration. If he does well and retains the same number of seats or does better, we're going to see continuity in trade policy and tariff pressure on Germany and other European countries, and this will probably have negative long-term effects on transatlantic relations. But if he does poorly and he adjusts, reduces tariffs, we may see a more unified approach to dealing with China, and that means Germany trying to get more access to the United States and North America, allowing it to have more strategic autonomy as it deals with China, the most disruptive actor in the international system today.
And Professor, you've already mentioned U.S. might rethink about this after midterms, but how do you think U.S. will view China overtaking it as Germany's top trading partner in recent or upcoming weeks? What steps might Washington take or Trump say to protect its economic and strategic interest in Europe in short term?
That's a great question. So it depends how much he prioritizes Germany as a partner, and how does he visualize changing those dynamics? In the short term, it's very difficult to fundamentally change the fact that China will overtake the United States as Germany's biggest partner. But there's a lot of ways to manage this with the Germans. Pressure can be applied for the Germans to buy more, to open up their market, to deregulate more. Pressure can be applied to the European Union in the same way, or there could be creative ways of shifting or penalizing Germany for trading so much with China. There's a lot of different formulas ahead. The Trump administration, especially President Trump, is anything but predictable. But one thing that we can understand is that they do want to have better trade balances between their allies, friends, as well as adversaries. And they're engaged in creative ways to do this. And they're open up to creative bargains that contribute to the Trump administration's general approach to making America great again. What can Germany do for itself? What can it do for the United States? This is the formula that I think the Germans need to be thinking about if they want to reset their relationships with the United States. And lastly, I think we should be clear that this may be Germany's way of trying to shift U.S. policy and shift U.S. policy to focus on Germany and the EU and the economic synergy that does exist, and a way of asking for more U.S. investment and to open up markets and to increase the trade relationships between Germany and the U.S. and the EU and the U.S. in general.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Professor Stefan Nagy for joining us and sharing that insight throughout our news. Now we move on. Taiwan's defense ministry has said that it will deepen cooperation with the United States. This includes reciprocal visits and observing military exercises to help maintain regional peace. The U.S. remains Taiwan's most important backer, providing defense support under U.S. law despite no formal ties. Defense Minister Wellington Koo will update lawmakers on high-level strategic dialogues, security cooperation, and joint military exercises with the U.S. China has stepped up pressure, conducting regular war games and joint combat readiness patrols, which Taiwan calls psychological coercion and a regional challenge. This ministry adds it shares intelligence as well as technology through international channels. This improves early warning and rapid response capacity against potential Chinese military actions. And that's a wrap on the China Report. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.